Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Speaking of which, let's go to where there's a concern of mass instability and violence, which is in Ireland. So moving over to Ireland, one of the questions Greg Keir asked this on what's happening with Brexit and Ireland. And for those who don't know, let's take a step back. So everyone's heard of the troubles in Ireland and the conflict in Ireland. There's a different map here we can go to, just if for some reason someone doesn't know the area we're talking about. Here we go. This is Ireland. There you go. Map of Ireland. Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom. Rest of the United Kingdom, Scotland and England are over here. Ireland itself. The troubles were an intense period of conflict, 1960s, really in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, conflicting around this border here and in Northern Ireland itself, split largely between nationalists who wanted to reunite Northern Ireland with Ireland and what are called unionists or loyalists who want to keep Northern Ireland part of the United Kingdom. What happens in 1988 is there is what's called the Good Friday Accord, which is technically between political parties so it involves state actors like the United Kingdom and Ireland, but it also involved 8 political parties in Northern Ireland. And these political parties are often proxies for their violent wings. So, and I'm not going to go through all the name of the political parties, but I'm more familiar with the violent wings. These political parties would sign this accord. And so you have the Ulster Volunteer Force, the Ulster Defense Association. These groups are sided with unionists or loyalists. You have the Provisional Irish Republican Army. They are sided with the nationalists. These non-state actor violent groups, through their political proxies, like Sinn Féin is the proxy of the Provisional IRA, they sign up to this Good Friday Accord. And I've done work on this. I can actually share this. So I've done, for my research, we actually looked at 4,500 incidents of terror in the last 23 years. And it captures these dynamics in here. So I want to show, here we go. So this is actually the database I use for my research, and I hope this is showing up and it's readable. And this is pulling the summary. So we looked at 4,500 incidents split between Western Europe, the United States. We typed them by violent ideology. We looked at whether they were done by non-state actors or individuals or uncertain. And we have this data. So this is the interface I use when I'm creating the papers and stuff. And to explain this chart, I'll be using some of these. This shows, this is looking just at Western Europe. And this is showing an incident rate per 1 million people of terrorist events in Western Europe over the last 23 years. So it goes 1995 through 2018. And I'm bringing this up because it captures these dynamics we're talking about. Now, we use incidents per 1 million. So it's got some odd numbers here, like 0.4 per 1 million. But that lets us normalize the population over 23 years. And right now, I'm looking at all of Western Europe across all violent ideologies. And this title up here just means we've excluded 9/11 and 2017, the loss, because of reasons. Read the paper. But what I can do with this is I can down select to only look at separatist violence. So when I click on separatist violence, you can see the change here. And the separatist violence shows what happens here. You have, these are incidents. And you can, first of all, if I select all, we're right now here at 0.36 going up to 0.5. And then it drops. So Western Europe as a whole has this rise and drop. Most of that is driven by separatism. People tend to overlook separatism as a continual, I call it the grindstone of Europe, right? There's a couple regional conflicts, Ireland being one, Corsica being another, Basque region in Spain. They're very localized, but in those localized areas, there's tons of terrorist activity. And so you see this increase spiking, and then the Good Friday Accord signed 1998, and you have this huge drop off because those military groups have signed on to the peace accord. Good Friday had a tremendous effect at reducing not just separatist violence, but violence across, excuse me, not just the people in Northern Ireland, but because that led a lot of the violence, you see it across Europe. Ireland was a big contributor of violence across Europe from an incident rate, and it drops. But what happens is not everyone's happy with this. So in 1997, a group called the Real IRA, and I apologize in advance for those who are not familiar with the naming conventions of the IRA. Everyone who's a nationalist in Ireland wants to be associated with the IRA. It's like the World of Darkness or the original White Wolf, and everyone's doing spin-off names from that or something like that. You know, the new World of Darkness, the old World of Darkness. So we've got the real IRA splits off from the provisional IRA in 1997 and says, hey, we're not going to sign a peace. We're going to stick to our guns, literally, and keep fighting. And you see that there's continuing violence here at a much lower rate. This is the real IRA. But then in 2012, a new non-state actor called the new IRA combines the real IRA with a couple other splinter groups that are committed to violence. And their goal is to undo the Good Friday Peace Accords. And you can see here in 2012, that violence spikes up. Now, I can look at a couple things in different ways. This is just the incident rate. If we look at the casualty rate, these are casualties per 1 million. We can see the casualty rate drop off. And again, you see the small spike. These are overall casualties. So casualties are getting less over time. That's good news. But we can also look at the rate of incidents with casualties. This looks at, for all the incidents that happen, how many were people actually hurt at? And here you see a very big spike of that actually, even though and this is the impact of the real IRA, even though or the new IRA, got to get those right, even though the frequency of violence declined, once the new IRA gets in, it spikes the incidences that cause harm to people back up. And this is one of the challenges that the concern is that there's, and I want to be clear here, this violence, this only goes through 2018. Our data stops in 2018 because there's a lag to get it. So this is not like last week or last year or last 2 years. This is through 20, but there's already been an uptick in violence for the last 6 years in Northern Ireland, concentrating on this. And we can look at, if I look at a different one here and pull up ideology by region and template, this is going to divide it into non-state actors, lone wolves, and people we don't know. So here's the incident rate. So now I'm looking at Western Europe, separatist, and you can see these three fishermen, those are non-state actors. So these are incidents by the real IRA, the new IRA, groups that are organized. Swarm is this gray at the bottom. Those are lone wolves where there's no evidence they're connected, and NA is we don't know. We suspect the NA and Ireland are kind of like wannabe copycats, but we're not entirely sure. And you can see here that as the non-state actor declines from 1998, it climbs back up with that announcement of the new IRA, and so do the wannabes. There's this matching pattern here. So maybe the NAs are ones that it was non-state actors we couldn't identify. They're being secretive about it. That's possible. But you see this uptick here that goes on, and this is why people are nervous. And you can definitely see it when it comes to the casualty rate and the incidents with casualty. It's a little choppy here because you don't always have data for each year, but you can begin to see why people are concerned in general that Ireland is not exactly stable or peaceful, even though it's had this long run. And what's coming on top of that is this problem of the Brexit. So Brexit is signed a couple years ago. And what Brexit does is, part of Brexit is removing the United Kingdom from the European Union. And going back to our map, where that really makes a difference is, here we go. When you pull the United Kingdom out of the European Union, this border becomes the only land border between the United Kingdom and the European Union. In theory, this should be a customs border, like you're going into any place, controlled access points, import customs regulations, visa controls, passport controls, checking the produce and all the goods that you're carrying and declaring whether you brought any fruit across the border. All of that goes into place. And what's happened over time is this has been a major concern of Brexit from the very beginning. Initially, the fear is this would be what would be called a hard border. And a hard border is really what I just described. Right now it's open travel between them because within the EU there's open borders, so there's been open things. A hard border would put in place, they would reduce the number of crossings, so they'd have to create choke points to manage the flow of people. It would institute provisional checks, might require passport checks. It would separate these areas that have been trying to work together. And the fear is that on a tactical level, when you create choke points, you create attack points that the terrorists might, on either side, might decide to attack those. There was a lot of concern within the Unionists and the Nationalists that are within still part of the Good Friday Accord that this was some move to gain power by one side or the other. So pretty much everyone rejected a hard border. Then there was something called the backstop. And the backstop was a plan that said, well, okay, we'll just let Northern Ireland, even though it's part of the UK, we're going to treat it like it's in the EU, and we're just not going to have a border, and we'll all pretend that nothing exists. And that didn't really fly. That's not really legal under either EU treaty. There was a lot of pushback in the UK, so that got scrapped. Last summer, kind of a smart idea came out that I'm kind of in favor of, called the New Protocol. And the New Protocol is kind of like, it's like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It says, so the border between the United Kingdom and Ireland exists somewhere in this water. And what that means is that it's basically de jure or de facto. De jure means by law, de facto means the actual. By law, Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom and has to have a hard border. By practice, that hard border would be put somewhere in the water, so it only affects people coming from the, England, Scotland area of the United Kingdom into Northern Ireland goods, and that relieves that pressure of having to create border controls along this entire border. And that's, everyone's pretty much in agreement that that's a good idea. But like most things in Brexit, no implementation, no details, no planning, nothing's in effect. The timeline, this is supposed to go in place January 1st, and there's been zero effort to develop this, put it in place, clarify what's going on. There's a lot of rules in there that allow sort of unitary or unilateral changes by the prime minister or his party, and there's a lot of concern that we don't know what's going to happen come January 1st. I mean, it's like anything else with Brexit. It's high on rhetoric, low on practical implementation details. And the concern that people have is that if you put in any sort of hard, divisive shock to the system, you have to put in a hard border, or the new protocol has unexpected effects because it wasn't planned out well. You're feeding more. First of all, you're giving symbolic power to groups that want to undo the Good Friday Accord. They can say, look, the Good Friday Accord's not working. We're separated again. You give practical targets for them to attack into, to target security areas. And you give recruiting functions for these military groups, these splinter groups, the new IRA, to start recruiting again and pull back in support. And let's see here, questions right now. Rage across, so yeah, rage across Brexit, IRA classic, old school people are commenting. Let's see. UK has announced today that they will walk away from, oh, good. So Laura's updated, UK has announced today they will walk away from Brexit talks next week if no deal. So this is new information. I obviously didn't see this when I was just yammering about what I'd researched this morning. And it's 2020, so why did I think that what I researched this morning would still be attacked? So what Laura is saying here is that the UK's announced they're going to walk away from the Brexit talks if no deal. And the question is, what does this mean? Well, first of all, this has been threatened many times, and I think it's partly a negotiating posture, but we are running out of time, so we're playing brinksmanship again, which is never fun. And what does it mean? It means if they walk away from the Brexit talks, then there is no provision, without some sort of arrangement, there is no provision for anything but a hard border. What happens then is either basically the border gets put in place, or all parties say we are willing to break our own laws and not put a border in and give it some more time. I don't know where the UK is going to fall. I don't know where the EU is going to fall. It's one of these things that everyone's so wrapped up around this border. None of them want a hard border. So I don't know if they basically walk away from the talk. Someone's going to say, I insist you put security choke points there and visa things, but to not put it there puts the EU in jeopardy, that everywhere where they have borders with other countries that aren't part of the EU, like I think Denmark is not part of the EU, they're saying, well, wait a minute, Ireland can travel without borders, why can't we? So it's a really tough bind, and I think it's going to end up with a hard border, but it will be interesting to see how far they implement that. Yeah, Celia is pointing out, with so many tiny roads and fields, it will never happen. This is another challenge with the border. Like Switzerland and Germany, there are official crossing points with customs and a ton of little trails everyone uses. There are literally, I've seen these pictures, there are fields with a stone wall that you can just walk across or go down a footpath in a group of woods, and these little tiny roads. This is a really good point. It's not like when you put these choke points in, yes, the big trucks and all the big movements of people in the buses, you can kind of choke point them there, but you're not going to seal the border. And this was a problem during the Troubles because you had the flow of arms and not just for casual use, but smuggling both ways and things like that becomes a real challenge. Yeah, Jen's pointing out the challenges just in Canada and the US, like if you bought groceries, that becomes a deal. Yeah, Celia's pointing out Switzerland is not EU. So Switzerland's another example of a country that if they didn't enforce hard borders on for the major trade points in Ireland, Switzerland can say, why are you enforcing it on us? These are all pressure points that are going to come to fruition here. And this is the risk for the Good Friday, is that uptick in violence we've seen over the last 6 years from 2012 is going to expand even more. Yeah, Joe, who's been in Ireland, done a lot of work there. The border's porous, but the checkpoints are guaranteed to be targets. I would not want to be a guard at one of those checkpoints. I would rather have, when I was in Afghanistan, a lot of people didn't realize this. A lot of the guard posts on the base had dummies standing up in them, like little people with binoculars. It wasn't, they weren't, you walk by and you look and you go, that guy hasn't moved all shift. He must be either really committed, or you look closer and it's like, oh, that's a mannequin. Great. I feel safe. I would hope these security border posts, I would put a dummy there and see who attacks it. I wouldn't want to be the guy stuck in that post because, yeah, they're going to be guaranteed targets for a Molotov cocktail or something like that. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.